all of the other children?
Sure.
What about all of the other
What about
people?
all of the other hoaxes?
So when you say that this is a hoax, Scott, no, Scott, I'm putting a stop to the talking points, okay? That's what I'm doing here.
Are you?
Because I'm talking about human beings.
When are we going to put a stop to the propaganda?
Listen, we've said it before on this show. We are talking about real things here, not talking points. Leave the talking points at the door.
Can I give you another example?
Scott, just hold on for just 1 second, because here's what I want to play.
A conservative panelist called Images of Starving Children in Gaza, a coordinated propaganda campaign. Abby Phillip stopped the segment. We are not dismissing starving children as a hoax on this show. That was not a hosting decision. That was a moral one.
The fact is, Gaza would not be in this situation, but not for Hamas and the actions they took, not just on October 7th, but what they have done systemically over nearly 20 years of being in power to use their own people as human shields. The suffering of the Palestinian people is the direct result of the leadership of Hamas and in Judea and Samaria of the Palestinian Authority. The fact is, no one is demanding that Russia provide the same level of aid to the Ukrainians. No one. Why is it that Israel is being subjected to a totally different standard when we talk about conducting a war? As President Bush said right after October 7th, the world stands with Israel. The moment they defend themselves, the world will turn. And that is exactly what we have seen. This is rooted not just in anti-Semitism and Jew hatred, this idea of the oppressor versus the oppressed. The oppressor of the Palestinian people is Hamas. And I will say this, and I think this is important for folks to understand. The world today in the Middle East, we are in a far better place today than we were prior to October 7th. And the reason is because Hamas and Hezbollah have been largely decimated. Assad's regime has fallen. Iran's air defenses are weakened. Their nuclear program is basically obliterated. And the fact is that wouldn't have happened if Bibi Netanyahu did not conduct this war in the manner in which he did.
I'm trying to understand something I thought I heard you say. Are you suggesting that that the international community is giving Russia a pass for what in
1,000%.
in Ukraine versus
1,000%
holding? So you're wait a second.
1,000%.
So explain that one to me. I'm not even really understanding.
Everyone should be held to the same standard.
So the global,
and that has not been what has
my
happened.
understanding is that there is pretty much universal global condemnation of Russia's conduct
so why
in this
is Europe
war,
still purchasing Russian gas?
Including the targeting of civilians in bombings in Ukraine.
And yet, what is Europe still doing? Purchasing Russian gas to fund their war.
Europe is providing tens of billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine to beat back the Russian invasion.
How do you beat it back when you fund it on the one hand?
But I don't want to get distracted by the Russia of it all.
Distraction.
No, it's not a distraction.
Congressman, I don't want to get distracted by the Russia of it all, because
nobody
I'm just saying,
even Russian mistreatment of Ukrainians in occupied territory.
Even by your own analogy,
they are not holding Russia to the same standard they try to hold Israel when it comes to humanitarian aid and assistance. And the fact is,
yes, they are.
Israel, no, they're not.
It's a ridiculous analogy.
Ridiculous.
Russia is being condemned all the time for mistreating civilians under its
Israel,
control.
in concert with the United States, has actually been providing humanitarian assistance. Hamas
clearly
continues
not enough because
to
people are starving, as President Trump himself has acknowledged.
Well,
maybe Hamas should release the aid and assistance.
Maybe
they should not be using their own people as human shields.
Just a second, Matt. Just a second, okay. Congressman. Just so we can level set here. Do you believe that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
Yes, as a result of Hamas.
All right. So there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Who controls whether aid comes in or out of Gaza?
Israel has been allowing aid.
Okay.
They have been working with the United States to bring aid into Gaza.
I'm just wondering, do they control it or not?
There is a operational security around the border for a reason.
Yes or no?
For a reason.
Congressman,
would you prefer that Israel do not control the border?
I am not asking whether it is justified or not. I am just asking, do they control the flow of aid in or out of Gaza?
Right, and aid has been flowing in.
The answer is yes, correct?
All right, why is it
the
that
answer is
Hamas
yes.
continues to steal aid and prevent aid from getting to their own people?
I want to move on for just a second.
Let's start with the propaganda claim, because it was the most consequential argument made on this panel, and the one that most clearly revealed the intellectual framework being used to avoid accountability. The conservative panelists cited a retracted New York Times photograph as evidence that coverage of starving children in Gaza was part of a coordinated campaign to manipulate public opinion against Israel. The New York Times retracted a specific photo. It did not retract the famine. It did not retract the World Food Program assessments. It did not retract the World Food Program assessments. It did not retract the reporting of every major humanitarian organization operating in the region or attempting to operate in the region. Abby Phillip made the distinction that the panel needed to hear. One retracted photo does not retract a humanitarian crisis documented by the United Nations, the World Food Program, Doctors Without Borders, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the governments of multiple allied nations, including the United Kingdom, France, and Canada. Using a single editorial correction to dismiss the broader documented reality of civilian starvation is not a factual argument.
Is what a lot of Democrats are saying, which is that should we not be able to criticize how things are done? You know, the degree of things being done without being accused of being anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
that's the question that they're asking.
This is why I think young people are seeing with their own eyes. They're not seeing through the lens of old politics or the way we used to do geopolitics. They can see with their own eyes on their phones what's happening in Gaza. And it's atrocious because these people are not just starving, they are being starved. Like, I am from Canada originally. If we were not allowing food into Alaska, if we were stopping Alaska from getting food, I wouldn't say, well, I'm Canadian, so I have to stand up for Canada. I would be like, feed the people, let the people have food. I think the problem is when politics and religion mix, which is what they really shouldn't do. And in an ethno-state like Israel, politics and religion are intertwined. So when you criticize the government, you end up sounding like you are criticizing the religion. And that's where I think people get confused. So it's not anti-Semitic to say you don't like what Netanyahu's doing, and yet they are constantly put together. I was speaking to a really good friend of mine recently who is Jewish in Los Angeles, and he was saying that, like, he's feeling so isolated himself in America right now from his own temple, because if he doesn't 100% stand up to support everything Israel's doing, he feels like he doesn't belong in his own temple. And he said, I'm having such a hard time right now because there's two things that I've always thought of myself as, an American and a Jew. And he's like, and right now I feel isolated from both communities, and it is the weirdest feeling. And I think a lot of people feel like that. They know what's happening, they can see what's happening, and they want it to stop.
We have to address, I mean, I agree with you, young people are seeing things with their own eyes. And what they're seeing is massive amounts of propaganda. Look what the New York Times had to admit to just in the last few days. I've heard repeat.
What did the New York Times
they admitted
running a photo that was a complete and total hoax?
They admitted that they ran a photo of a starving child who also had a disease.
You're gonna defend this?
Is that the admission?
It's a hoax.
You're gonna act like people aren't starving?
And it was sent around the world to make people
Scott,
think that Israel had starved that child. He had a pre-existing condition.
What about all the other children in that story? What about them? Are they a hoax?
Abby, there is a coordinated propaganda campaign right now to paint a distorted picture of what's happening.
Are all of those other children a hoax?
Some of them are. There have been other stories about children that Israel is actually paying to have taken care of for their pre-existing conditions.
There have been 25 people
President Trump
who died of
starvation.
starvation.
And on top of
Scott,
that,
hang on a second. You just claimed that this whole thing
ran
was
a correction. They ran a correction.
What you claimed was that all of these young people, not just young people, but everybody in the world, the photos that they're seeing, the stories that they're reading, the first-person accounts are a hoax? Are they a hoax?
I'm saying that the photo that the New York Times ran and then ran a correction on is a part of a propaganda campaign that is occurring right now.
I do not agree with you on the New York Times photo, but let's say that one was wrong, they ran a correction, fine. What about all of the other children?
Sure.
What about all of the other
What about
people?
all of the other hoaxes?
So when you say that this is a hoax, Scott, no, Scott, I'm putting a stop to the talking points, okay? That's what I'm doing here.
Are you?
Because I'm talking about human beings.
When are we going to put a stop to the propaganda?
Listen, we've said it before on this show. We are talking about real things here, not talking points. Leave the talking points at the door.
Can I give you another example?
Scott, just hold on for just 1 second, because here's what I want to play. Let me play the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, who...
It is a rhetorical move designed to cast doubt on an overwhelming body of evidence by attacking one piece of it. Phillip refused to let that move land unchallenged. She stopped the segment and said so directly. The responsibility debate produced the most legally significant exchange of the panel. The conservative argument was straightforward. Hamas is responsible for the humanitarian crisis because Hamas diverts aid, Hamas uses civilian infrastructure, Hamas started this war, and Hamas controls Gaza. All of those claims have varying degrees of documented support. Hamas does divert aid. Hamas did attack Israel on October 7th. Hamas does operate within civilian areas. None of that, however, resolves the legal question that the opposing panelists kept returning to. Under international humanitarian law, specifically the laws of war that Israel, as a democracy and signatory to the Geneva Conventions, is bound by. The party controlling the borders of a territory has obligations regarding the flow of humanitarian aid to civilians in that territory. This is not a contested legal principle. It is established law. Israel controls the entry points into Gaza. Israel has authority over what trucks enter, what goods are permitted, and at what pace humanitarian corridors are opened or closed. The argument that Hamas is responsible for the starvation of Gazan civilians because Hamas is bad does not relieve Israel of its legal obligations as the controlling party at the border. Both things can be true simultaneously. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has caused enormous suffering, and Israel has legal obligations regarding civilian access to food and medicine that exist regardless of Hamas's conduct. The anti-Semitism versus legitimate criticism debate touched on something the conservative panelists kept conflating. Criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu's government and its military conduct in Gaza is not anti-Semitism. It is the same category of criticism that is applied to every democratic government in the world when its military actions produce civilian casualties at scale. The panel's progressive voices made this distinction repeatedly. Israel is a democracy and a U.S. ally. Democratic allies are held to democratic standards, not because we hate them, but because we respect what they claim to stand for. Holding the Israeli government accountable for civilian starvation in a territory it controls is not a denial of Israel's right to exist, or a denial of the horror of October 7th. It is the application of the same standard we would apply to any democratic state conducting military operations in a densely populated civilian area. The young people polling data that surfaced briefly in this panel deserves more attention than it received. Across every age demographic, but especially among voters under 40, support for unconditional U.S. backing of Israeli military operations has declined significantly. That shift is not being driven by anti-Semitism. It is being driven by images, real, documented, verified images of children who are starving, images of hospitals that have been destroyed, images of aid trucks that are not getting through. Young voters who grew up with the internet and who can access footage from multiple sources simultaneously are not being manipulated by a coordinated propaganda campaign. They are watching and drawing conclusions. And the conclusion that dismissing their concern as propaganda is not a sustainable political strategy. That much was visible on this panel, even if it was not stated in those terms.
This issue. And I want to give him actually a lot of credit here because he answered this question with humanity and honesty. Listen to this.
We've got a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I mean, the pictures tell a thousand words, and it's heartbreaking. We want an end to the conflict there. We want peace, and we want to end that whole crisis. President Trump is using a strong hand to try to forge that, and we're moving in the right direction. The IDF under Israel, of course, has opened new channels for food aid to go into Gaza, and we've set up new mechanisms. The U.S. is going to work with our partners and allies around the world to make sure that happens.
I agree with everything he said.
I want to just underscore real quick. I want to give him a lot of credit for that. I mean, maybe it's more than he just answered the question honestly. He didn't try to spin it. He didn't call it a hoax. It is a choice to call what is happening in Gaza a hoax. You might disagree with the decision to run a single photo.
I'm talking about the photo.
But your comments,
and it's an example of the kind of propaganda that's being used to color public opinion.
I'm asking you to pull back from this ledge, okay? That is what I'm asking. And answer the question honestly. That photo, let's say that photo was maybe the wrong editorial decision, but is what is happening over there a hoax?
No,
okay,
I agree with everything
you.
Johnson
Thank
said.
you.
There is a humanitarian crisis, but the question was, why is public opinion changing? And I'm telling you that it's changing because people are being misinformed. There's another example.
No, it's changing because we are no longer being
we've been told that
misinformed.
there's no evidence that Hamas is looting the trucks. Today, the United Nations' own data that they published said 90% of the trucks from May to July were looted by Hamas.
Okay, that data,
so again,
hold on, Scott,
propaganda.
stop. That data says that those trucks that you're talking about, it's not 90%, but those trucks that you are talking about were either taken by hungry people or by armed looters.
And who are the armed looters?
And hold on a second, Scott. Do you know what proportion of those trucks were taken by armed looters versus hungry people? No, you don't.
There are armed Hamas looters.
Scott, so I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
But I'm just saying.
Just one
we've
second.
said no
okay?
evidence. There's evidence.
I am just saying. We have reporters in Gaza who are talking to women and families who go to the entrance points for aid trucks. And they go there to try to get aid directly from the trucks because they are worried about going to the distribution sites because it is dangerous. So those hungry people are, quote unquote, looting from the trucks to survive.
So
I just want to make that point.
Where's the danger?
Look, I think there's an important reset that
who is making it dangerous.
I think for those of us who hold Israel's security as something that we find to be important, we want Israel to be fine. We want Israel to be secure. That we have a kinship toward Israel because it's a nation that feels a lot like the United States is and how it's constructed, right? So we do hold them to a high standard. The same way we would hold the U.S. government to a high standard when they interact, when we were in Afghanistan and what we did when we were there, and we try to take care of people when we were in the middle of a war in Afghanistan, right? We did that. So I think to say that that there's something wrong with holding Israel to a high standard, I think that that's disingenuous. So for those of us who have a kinship with Israel, I think we want to say, like, Israel, behave the right way. And so what we're seeing now is this crazy confluence that you're just talking about. We're seeing the United Nations, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, independent reporters who are on the ground, conservative Republicans, the President of the United States, the Speaker of the House of the United States are both Republicans, all saying that there is a humanitarian crisis happening here and Israel can do something to stop it. They're not doing. The only people who say something different than that is Bibi Netanyahu. And why would we take Bibi Netanyahu's word for this when he clearly is the one who is self-interested in perpetuating the situation? We've got to do something to save these children.
All right, we got...
Pull back from the specific arguments and look at what this panel actually demonstrated. A humanitarian crisis documented by every major international organization was described as a coordinated propaganda campaign by a panelist on a major American news network. The anchor refused to let that characterization stand. The conservative panelists spent the segment arguing about Hamas's conduct rather than engaging with Israel's legal obligations as the controlling party at the border. The legal standard, that the party controlling humanitarian access has obligations regarding civilian starvation, was raised and not substantively answered. That non-answer is the most important thing to carry forward. Because the legal question does not go away when the panel ends. International courts are examining it. Allied governments are raising it. And the polling among younger Americans suggests that the public is arriving at its own conclusions about it, independent of what any panelist argues on cable news. Abby Phillip stopped the segment when starving children were called a hoax. That moment matters beyond this specific panel, because the willingness of a moderator to draw a line at the dismissal of documented civilian suffering is not a political act. It is a human one. And the fact that it required drawing at all tells you something important about where the conversation has been allowed to go. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the legal argument about Israel's obligations at the border is being taken seriously enough in American political debate? And what do you make of the propaganda accusation as a rhetorical strategy for dismissing humanitarian reporting? Subscribe. We will keep following this story and the accountability questions it raises.